What's up everybody? Welcome back to the book club app that we're building. So in the previous episode we had a 4-hour long live stream where we refactored the whole app and basically cleaned up the code to make it work a lot better. Today we're going to work on this second card and start the functionality for revealing the next book. But before we do that, I wanted to quickly go over what we were able to do in that live stream. Also, I'll include the link, and in the description of the live stream there's like time points for all the things we did. So the main objective of the live stream was to reformat the code and refactor it to work with the new widget tree that we created. So the main difference between the previous code and this one is all three of these states are now streams instead of just change notifier providers. Now, since everything is a stream, we're able to do things like this. So we have two books, the current UID, which is Brave New World, and then we have another one that I made. So let's say we want to edit this field. We change it to 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you'll see it updates by itself. Are able to see the new book. So in our cloud functions, when we'll be able to update this current book ID, and it'll be able to change to the book that we want. So before going into the code, I wanted to explain a bit what we're going to try to accomplish today. So here's a normal case of what we have. This is the database for our group. So we have our current book ID, which will display the book we're reading, and then we'll have the next book ID, which will start off with waiting. So if you're reading from Firestore, you see the word waiting, you'll display on that button right here. We will display we are waiting for so-and-so user to pick book. Then once they pick it, this waiting will be changed to the actual ID of the book. And then once the Cloud Firestore function executes on book club day, this index will get incremented. So we'll add 1 or loop back to the beginning if it's at the end. And this will get set back to waiting. So the one case that is a bit weird is right after we create a group. So we only have one member, and that member obviously picked the first book that we have, but they're also the next person picking a book as well. So for now, we're just going to keep it that way. Right after the group is created, the leader, or the one who created the group, will get 2 picks at the beginning. And then on book club day, let's say it rolls around, the cloud function executes. If there's another member, this index will get incremented, and then he'll obviously pick the third book. But let's say another second member doesn't join, then the first member will just keep picking. So now that we got that covered, let's go into the code. So during refactoring, everything pretty much stayed the same, except we're using streams now instead of change notifier provider. The way I organize those streams is a bit different too. So in our services, we have our authentication, which has everything to do with authentication. It's no longer in its own states folder. Then we have DB future, which is database that returns futures, and then DB stream. The reason I don't have the states folder anymore is because when I was thinking about it, I'm like, the stream really isn't a state. You're just streaming data from the database. There's no reason for it to be in a states folder. And then the second thing I changed was in the group screen, we had this. I separated the top card and the bottom card into its own widget. And I called the top card and second card. So top card has everything we need. And then the second card is what we're going to implement today. So before we get to the actual second card implementation, we need to update the group model. So we can remove current book due. We'll just have the current book ID, and using that ID we will retrieve the book and then know the due date for it. But we need to add 2 things, and that is integer for index picking book and string value for the next book ID. So let's add these real quick. And there we have the updated group model. So next, second thing we're going to need 2 new functions that interface with the database. We're going to need an add next book. So we have the add new book, the add book for the initial adding of the book when we first start the group, but we also need to add next book. Same thing, we need the group ID and which book we want to add. So we'll do the same thing where we add it to the books collection. Nothing's really any different here. But then over here, we'll have next book ID. And then we will actually need one more thing. And then there's one more function that we will need, and it's to retrieve the user. So we're going to have the next person picking the book, we're going to have his UID, and we need to get his information. For example, when I said we will be displaying the name of the user that needs to pick it here, we'll need his name. So for that, we can call this get user, and we will return the user model. Here we won't actually instantiate the user model yet, because we're going to do it using our named constructor. And then we need to pass in the UID of the user we want. And then in here, make sure we go to users collection, because that's where all the users are, and find the one with the UID. Then once you got it, write val equals user model dot from document snapshot, and then pass in the document snapshot. I named it doc snapshot. Okay. So now in here, let's make it a little bit simpler for ourselves. We just need one text, and we can remove this row as well. And we're going to need to make this a stateless widget, since it will be having some type of state. And then we will need three things. We will need a group model, which will contain the information about the group, so we could get the next ID and all the members and things like that. They'll need a user, which will be the current user. And then we need another user, which will be the next user. Or actually, let's name it picking user. Okay, so now we need to initialize those. In the did change dependencies, let's add two calls to the provider to get the current group. Provider dot of context, and then try to be quick there, but it didn't work. And then group model. Then same thing with the current user. And there we have those two. And there's one tricky part about this. So our group model is initialized to null. Only when we receive the stream data does it actually have stuff. So we don't know the picking user and what it is until we have all that stuff initialized. So if group model does not equal null, only then do we want to initialize the picking user. And we do that using the function we created called get user. So for this, we will need to get the user ID from the list of members that we have. Remember, these are the members, and all the IDs are in here. So we will get the next picking book index, and then go to that index in the member list and return that. So it's going to look a bit ugly, but if you break it down, it works perfectly. So we get the members array, and then we get the index picking book, and that will return the UID for us, and then we will be able to get the user with that. And we get set state whenever that happens. So now let's get to the actual displaying what we need here. So actually, instead of returning this text widget, we're going to return a function named display text. So display text isn't defined yet. That's perfectly fine. Display text. And here we'll have a widget and return that widget at the end. So there's a couple things we need to check in here. So first, we need to make sure the picking user is not null. Because if we don't have that information, we have nothing. That will only happen if we haven't finished initializing everything, and then we should just return loading. And we'll bring in the same style that we had before. Actually, here we're not really returning it unless we're setting it equal to red val there. So if the user is not null, that means we have all the data that we need. And then we need to check another thing. So if the group model dot next book ID, like I was showing here at the beginning, it will be waiting. Once the ID is picked, then this will be the actual ID of the book. So if the next book ID is equal to waiting, we will do some stuff. Otherwise, we will display the next book. Then if we are waiting, that means someone needs to select the book. We need to figure out if it's us that needs to select the book or somebody else. So if we get the picking user and his UID is equal to the current user UID, that means we're the ones that need to pick the book. And in that case, we need to show a raise button with a child that says select next book. And then on pressed, we need to do something. But let's do the other case. Let's say we're not the ones that need the book. So ret val will be, we can copy this text, and it will say waiting for the picking user dot full name to pick. So here, since I'm the current user and we don't have a second book in there, I have the option to select next book. And then I created a second user, so if we log in with johndoe@gmail.com with password 123456, very secure. If we log in, here we'll see waiting for Tadas to pick book. Alright, so now one of the last steps is to actually add a book when we click this button. We have this function in the group saying go to add book. We will just move this over to our second card now. And then here we can remove this. This was just the book club history which we were temporarily using. We don't need that anymore. Now in here we can update it to work for what we need. So first let's add that. Current user is just current user that we have. And for this to work, we're going to actually need to pass one more thing in here. Oh man, I'm such a noob. So I had this plus plus. Make sure you don't do that. That increments this thing right now. It doesn't set this to the value +1. Make sure you do this when you do the index. Now it worked. Here you can see we have the next book, which is book 8, me, and then the next book ID is KMC and that one. And the next index will be this one. So alright, that works. Now the last thing is we actually have to display what the next book is here. So that will happen here. Let's set up a column with some children. On top we will have text saying next book is, and we need to retrieve the next book. So have book model next book equals db future dot get current book, and group ID is group model dot ID and then group model dot next book ID, and make sure we await this. And then now I need this display text to be asynchronous. Hopefully it doesn't break anything. Alright, so it does break something, so we're just going to take the easy route for now and get it whenever the dependencies change. And we can remove this async word. Alright, so then up here, let's say once the group model is done, let's get the next book. And then now, hopefully, down here we can display. Let's steal the exact formatting from the top card. These two. Steal that and add them to the children. And this is if next book is not equal to null, then next book dot name. And why are we having issues here? Oh, I put a period instead of a comma. Okay, and then same thing here. Next book and next book. All right. Book 8, me. Perfect. And let's give a size box here of height 20. And then let's take this style off. Hopefully it'll turn black. And might as well make the font weight bold. All right, I think that looks good. So let's create an actual book just so it looks nicer. So everything's working. That's it for this video. This code will be on GitHub, like always. The next video, we're going to be setting up push notification for when this book is released. But like, subscribe, and share if you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.